Leticia was a fun, free-spirited kid, but ever since she got engaged to Crown Prince Clarke at just 7 years old, her life's been totally restricted, and she ended up hating him. She finally managed to run away and settle in the countryside for some peace, but her quiet life didn't last long, cause Clarke showed up again, chasing her from place to place. Our episode begins today with Leticia, a beautiful girl with red hair. It seems she's in the royal palace and part of a royal family. She's trying to escape the palace but fails. The next morning, we see Leticia playing with her dog, John. Afterward, we get to know her royal family. Her father is Duke Dorman, and her brother's name is Nader. Her mother shares some exciting news with her. Her future has been decided. Her father, Duke Dorman, tells her she'll be going to the castle to learn how to become a proper lady and a good wife. But when Leticia finds out she'll be going alone, she cries a lot. Her father hugs her and reassures her, saying, "You'll be fine, my little one. Don't cry." Finally, the day comes for her to leave the royal palace and head to the castle. Her brother Nader will accompany her, and their mother tells him to take care of his sister. They set off by car, driving through beautiful lands and vast fields. Eventually, they reach their destination. Her brother helps her out of the car, and they enter the grand castle. Leticia meets her teacher, Layla, who immediately starts teaching her how to speak politely, greet properly, and maintain proper posture. Layla introduces herself, and when Leticia tries to repeat what Layla said, her voice is low and she stumbles over her words. Layla makes her repeat the sentence many times until she can say it faster and more clearly. Layla even threatens her with a stick, which makes Leticia cry out of fear. Later, the scene shifts to Leticia in her room. Her brother advises her to listen and learn the lessons, telling her it will be hard at first but will get easier over time. Leticia says she wants to return home and plans to escape, but her brother warns her that if she tries to run away, they'll become stricter and she'll be under special surveillance. He then calls for her new maid, Layla, who will be helping Leticia with her lessons. The following morning, Layla wakes Leticia up early so she can prepare for her new day at the castle. Leticia arrives at her lessons, and her teacher begins by teaching her the proper way to stand. She places a book on Leticia's head and tells her to walk without letting it fall, keeping her body steady as she moves. But as Leticia takes her first step, the book falls. Her teacher says, "Try again." The teacher asks Leticia to pick up the book and place it on her head again. Leticia tries but still struggles to walk without the book falling. The teacher insists she repeat the exercise until she gets it right. The next morning, Layla wakes Leticia up. Once she's ready, Leticia heads to her lesson, where the teacher begins instructing her on how to eat properly. The teacher explains, hold the spoon by gripping the middle of the handle with your thumb, index finger, and middle finger. Lift it gently in this way. Leticia listens and tries to follow the instructions. The teacher also warns her not to make any noise by hitting the spoon against the plate. However, Leticia makes a mistake, and the teacher makes her repeat the process until she does it correctly. Later, the teacher begins teaching her how to dance. During practice, Leticia falls to the ground. The teacher orders her to get up and continue her lesson. As the years pass, Leticia grows older. One morning, the teacher gathers the other princesses of the palace to showcase Leticia's progress. Everyone is amazed by her poise, her refined way of speaking, and her graceful greetings. After the demonstration, Leticia moves on to her history lesson. By the time Leticia turns 17, it's time for her engagement to Prince Clarke. A grand engagement party is prepared, and Leticia wears a stunning dress, looking more beautiful than ever. Everyone is captivated by her appearance. However, when Leticia approaches Prince Clarke, she sees another girl with him, Brianna Lariquel. Prince Clarke informs Leticia that he won't be able to accompany her today. Leticia quickly understands that Brianna is his companion and that her engagement has effectively been canceled. The guests are shocked, assuming Leticia must be heartbroken. But to everyone's surprise, she starts laughing. Leticia had never wanted to be engaged to Prince Clarke in the first place. She then approaches her brother, Nader, and reminds him of his promise. A flashback reveals Leticia talking to Nader, saying, "I want to cancel my engagement. There must be a way. Ask father on my behalf." Nader replies, "That's impossible. I don't have the authority to do that. Focus on your royal lessons so you don't bring shame to our family." Leticia pleads, "I'm begging you." But what if Clarke falls in love with another woman? Nader responds, "You know that will never happen." Leticia confidently says, "Things like that do happen when marriages are arranged by parents. If Clarke loves someone else, I'll have a reason to cancel the engagement." Back in the present, we see Leticia beaming with happiness. She dances and exclaims, "I'm finally free." She approaches Brianna, who is still with Clarke, and thanks her. "This is all thanks to you. I owe you so much," Leticia says with heartfelt gratitude. "I've been studying etiquette every single day, walking, sitting, standing, studying history, politics, and economics, dancing endlessly, drinking tea until my stomach was full, and enduring the constant bullying of the nobles. And finally, I'm free of all that torment." Leticia bids everyone farewell, and as she leaves, Clarke follows her. She turns to him and says, "I'm so happy. I wish I had canceled the engagement sooner so I wouldn't have wasted all that time here. But everything is fine now. I'll keep my negative thoughts to myself. I'm moving to a faraway place, so feel free to be with whoever you want, have as many children as you wish, and bring prosperity to your kingdom. Leticia then says goodbye to Clarke and leaves. She arrives at the palace and talks to Layla, saying, "We're moving out of here. Happiness comes when you least expect it. My engagement to Prince Clarke, the Crown Prince of the Starro Kingdom, has finally been canceled. I've been suffering since I was 7. Every little thing I did was criticized, but now I'm free from all of it. You and I will move together, though I haven't decided where yet. Somewhere unknown, it'll be wonderful." Natter arrives, visibly upset about the engagement being canceled. Leticia tells him sarcastically, "Good luck finding another way to get closer to the royal family." We then see Natter sitting sadly, saying to himself, "I think we should move to the village of Aperta." Leticia overhears and says, "Aperta? One of Duke Dorman's rural estates with rivers and forests? That sounds perfect. We'll go to Aperta. I want to leave in the morning, so we better start preparing. We'll take everything we need. Life in Aperta will be much simpler than what we're used to here." She asks Layla to accompany her, and Layla agrees. Leticia is overjoyed. And so today's episode of this anime comes to an end. Stay tuned for upcoming episodes. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you won't miss anything new. The episode begins early in the morning at the castle, where we find Catherine and Isabella in the castle garden having breakfast. However, they both seem sad because Leticia has left the castle. They had thought Leticia was a perfect match for Clarke. At that moment, Sebastian arrives to inform them that Queen Laura is demanding an explanation for what happened during the evening ball. Meanwhile, we see Leticia in the forest with Lily. They are playing and enjoying themselves as Leticia feels free now. Leticia shares that she plans to stop at the village square on her way back to fish in the nearby lake. Lily encourages her to take good care of herself. Leticia happily sets off, thrilled that Lily isn't bothering her as she used to when Leticia was engaged to Clarke. Initially, Leticia had been forced to act like a proper lady. When she reaches the lake, she takes out her fishing rod and starts fishing. She manages to catch her first fish, but just as she celebrates, Clarke appears. Startled by his sudden presence, Leticia falls to the ground. Clarke quickly rushes to help her. Together, they light a fire to grill the fish. When the fish is ready, Leticia takes her portion and begins eating. She's delighted by the taste and remarks that the fish she just cooked is delicious. Clarke watches her eat and comments on how she managed to cook the fish she caught herself. Leticia explains that while she enjoys fishing, she always releases small fish back into the river as she doesn't want to act greedily. She only takes what she needs to enjoy herself. She then offers Clarke the other fish, warning him that the skewer is still hot. Despite her warning, Clarke grabs the skewer and realizes it's indeed very hot. Nonetheless, he eats the fish with her and enjoys its fresh, delicious taste. Clarke asks Leticia why the food served at the castle is always cold. She replies that it's because the royal family avoids burning their tongues. After finishing their meal, they continue strolling through the forest. Later, Leticia visits a fish merchant and gives him the fish she caught. The merchant thanks her for the wonderful fish. Leticia responds with a smile, saying that she tried a new fishing technique and managed to catch a fish right away. This scene emphasizes Leticia's newfound freedom and joy as she explores life beyond the constraints of the castle. Clarke gently warns Leticia to be careful not to hurt her hands. After that, Leticia strolls around the village, distributing the fish she caught to the villagers. Everyone adores her and often seeks her advice on various matters. Meanwhile, we see Clarke sitting at a local shop where the shopkeeper comments that their village has become much livelier since Leticia arrived. The shopkeeper notes that, despite being a noble, Leticia treats everyone equally, and the entire village loves her for it. Hearing this, Clarke resolves to do everything he can to make her happy. Later, Leticia heads out with Clarke, carrying her fishing gear in other bags. Clarke offers to help her carry them, but she refuses, explaining that she would never let anyone else carry her precious fishing equipment. She admits that she was never suited to be a princess. She loves running, climbing trees, and fishing. Nothing brings her more joy than being out in nature. As they walk, Clarke notices several horses grazing nearby and marvels at their beauty. Leticia smiles and explains that the horses belong to the villagers. The lush, nutritious grass in the pasture helps them grow strong and healthy. She shares that her dream has always been to live in the countryside, and she hopes to learn more about rural life. At that moment, a stunning white horse approaches them, curiously eyeing Clarke. Leticia explains that this horse is always curious about strangers. Clarke is captivated by the horse's beauty, admitting that he's never seen a horse as magnificent as this one. Leticia laughs softly and confesses she hadn't paid much attention to the horse before. Then, with a playful tone, she remarks, "As expected of a prince, look at how handsome you are." Members of the royal family always seem to shine brighter in nature. Clarke smiles and asks, "What brought you to this village?" Leticia, a bit flustered, turns the question back on him, asking why he's here when he's so busy with royal duties. Clarke replies, "I needed some fresh air. Coming to this village has shown me a different side of you. I've seen you angry, serious, and smiling. You haven't changed at all since that time. We're still engaged, Leticia. I'll come back to take you soon." With those words, Clarke walks away. As soon as he's out of sight, Leticia's face turns red with frustration. She yells at the top of her lungs, furious at his audacity and bold statements. Despite her anger, her feelings remain conflicted, and she's left pondering his words as the scene fades. The scene transitions to Leticia returning to the castle, visibly frustrated. Lily approaches her, asking, "Why are you yelling like that? What happened to you?" Leticia replies in exasperation, "Let's run away from here." Lily, taken aback, responds, "We can't do that. Your brother Nader has come to see you." Reluctantly, Leticia goes to meet her brother. She immediately confronts him, angry that he hasn't canceled her engagement. Nader calmly explains, "I didn't cancel it because Clarke's feelings for you haven't changed. I want you to reconsider." This reminds Leticia of the ball when Clarke told her he couldn't accompany her that evening, but never mentioned canceling the engagement. Nader continues, "He hasn't broken off the engagement. He's been trying to make you jealous, and from what I can tell, he's enjoying watching your fire reactions." Later, Brianna comes to talk to Leticia. "You've been ignoring me," she begins. "I came here to speak with you. I want you to return to the castle. I've been roped into taking princess lessons since you left, and it's unbearable. I've fallen for a man who's in love with another woman. But the worst part is Layla. She's insufferable, strict, and crazy, but you need to endure all of this to become queen. The prince has even made an official announcement that he won't have heirs unless it's with you." Horrified by this revelation, Leticia screams in distress. Soon after, her parents arrive at the castle. Shocked, Leticia asks, "What are you doing here?" Her mother slaps her lightly and says, "I didn't come because you missed me. We rushed here after hearing about your departure. Didn't you agree to stay and finish your princess lessons? I've been extremely worried about you, and if Lily hadn't told me, I wouldn't have known." That night, Leticia attempts to escape from the castle, but her plan fails. Brianna catches her in the act and grabs her arm. "If I don't bring you back, I'll be stuck in those princess lessons forever. I've had enough of you. I'll keep you here, no matter what it takes." Desperate, Leticia makes her an offer. "If you let me go, I'll do everything I can to arrange your marriage to my brother. He's the heir of the Duke, smart, athletic, and while he has some flaws, he's an excellent match if you can overlook them." Intrigued, Brianna agrees and releases Leticia. Grateful, Leticia says, "I owe you so much. By the way, my brother's favorite food is unsweetened cake." Leticia finally escapes the castle, thrilled to be free once again. However, as she hurries away, she runs into Clarke. "There's something I forgot to ask you," he says, a sly smile on his face. "What color do you want your wedding dress to be?" Stunned, Leticia stares at him in disbelief and replies, "I don't think this is the right time for that. If you were in Leticia's place, would you choose to return to the castle and face your destiny as a princess, or would you choose to escape to pursue your freedom? And why?" The episode ends with this cliffhanger. Stay tuned for the next episodes of this anime. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to stay updated with all our new content. Our episode today begins with Queen Laura, who is being followed by a group of girls eager to train at the royal palace and learn how to treat guests. At that moment, she calls out to Siba, who happens to be passing by, surprised to see her in the servants' quarters. He asks her to return to her place immediately. However, she calmly replies, "It doesn't matter if it's a place for servants or a place for the queen. In the end, we are all human. Tell me, has Clarke returned home yet?" Siba informs her that Clarke will return tomorrow morning, God willing. She then asks him about the girl who caused a scene at last night's elegant dance party and suddenly disappeared. He replies, "Do you mean Letty? She's the odd girl who did that." Queen Laura tells him she wants to meet Letty, as she found her to be a very good girl and liked her the moment she saw her. The scene transitions to Letty, who is visibly annoyed with Prince Clarke as he carries her over his shoulder. "Let me go, you idiot," she yells, but he refuses, knowing she's trying to escape. Her father speaks to Clarke, pleading with him to take good care of her and treat her kindly. At that moment, Nader arrives and informs Clarke that the carriage is ready. Letty gets upset and says, "What about your promise, brother?" But he completely ignores her and talks to Clarke about executing the plan they discussed last night. Later, as the wedding approaches, Letty notices that no one is speaking to her, not even her maid, Layla, who simply wishes her happiness from the bottom of her heart. Feeling helpless, Letty screams at the top of her lungs, but it's too late for that. She gets into the carriage with Clarke and they leave. Letty talks to herself, lamenting that even her maid Layla isn't with her. She stares out of the window, ignoring Clarke entirely. He asks her, "Do you hate me now for taking you this way?" She replies, "I don't hate you, but I don't love you either." Clarke grabs her hand, causing her to scream as she doesn't want him to touch her. He tells her he's happy they finally have the chance to talk and confesses that he loves her deeply and never wants to be apart from her. When he tries to kiss her, she refuses and hits him hard, slamming him against the side of the carriage. He laughs and smiles, but she apologizes for striking him so fiercely. He assures her it's fine and remarks, "We still have a long way to go." Clarke then lays out a blanket and rests his head on her shoulder, leaving Letty completely bewildered by his audacious behavior. The next morning, Letty wakes up to Clarke calling her name as they've finally arrived at the castle. She steps out of the carriage and marvels at the stables filled with donkeys, horses, and a pond teeming with ducks and geese. Overjoyed, she learns from Clarke that he created this space just for her after discovering her love for nature. He even stocked the pond with fish so she could enjoy fishing at her leisure. Though genuinely happy, Letty tries not to show it. Clarke tells her that after the wedding, her life will be even better. He also informs her that he has arranged to stop her princess lessons as he wants her to stay true to herself. He reveals that he received permission from the king his father, who told him, "Do as you wish, my son. If you want her this way, so be it. Just don't marry anyone else." Clarke then looks at Letty and says, "I want you by my side always. Don't ever run away from me." Clarke proposed to Letty, but she firmly rejected his offer. He tried to convince her, insisting it wasn't such a bad arrangement compared to marrying into a lesser family, but Letty refused him again. He then promised her a life filled with luxury and reminded her that if she didn't marry him, her family would eventually force her into marriage anyway. "So why not choose this excellent option in front of you?" he asked. Letty, however, rejected him a third time. Frustrated, Clarke asked what it was that displeased her so much about the proposal. Letty replied that she didn't want to marry anyone from the royal family. Clarke told her that this would be the only thing she'd have to endure, but Letty still refused. Determined, Clarke took her to his castle and locked her in a grand room, telling her to wait there while he prepared for the wedding ceremony. Furious, Letty tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. Exhausted, she sat on the luxurious couch and looked around the room. Despite its beauty, she couldn't feel even a hint of happiness. Fatigue eventually overwhelmed her, and she fell into a deep sleep. In her dreams, Letty imagined herself fishing at the lake with her rod. Suddenly, Clarke appeared, holding the fishing rod, and asked her to marry him again. Frightened, Letty ran away, but Clarke chased her no matter where she went. She screamed loudly, and the sound jolted her awake. When she opened her eyes, Letty found a maid standing before her, informing her that breakfast was ready. Sitting at the table, Letty was amazed by the presentation of the dishes. The maid explained that the featured dish was the chef's specialty scrambled eggs with croissants and made with the finest ingredients. Letty found the meal delicious and thanked the maid for the wonderful food. Afterward, the maid prepared a bath for her, combed her hair, and helped her get ready. When it came time to choose a dress, the maid unveiled a collection of gowns designed specifically for Letty. She was astonished by their beauty and eventually selected one. Once she put it on, she looked stunning. After finishing her preparations, the maid asked for permission to leave, saying she would return later. Letty realized this was her chance to escape. She quickly ran out of the room, desperate for her freedom. The maid called for the guards, but no one seemed to hear her. Letty kept running until she found a window. She opened it and managed to climb out of the castle. However, when she reached the ground, she found Clarke waiting for her. Without hesitation, he hoisted her onto his shoulder, determined to take her back to the castle. It seemed he still had more plans to impress her and make her reconsider running away. Letty returns to the castle feeling dejected after her plan to live a life of freedom and tranquility fails. Sitting in her room, she reflects, "Here I am, eating delicious dishes and croissants, taking warm baths with fragrant aromas, and wearing the many strange dresses chosen by Prince Clarke." Her thoughts are interrupted when the maid enters, offering her a drink and apologizing for pushing her earlier. The maid hopes Letty wasn't hurt, and in the course of their conversation, Letty realizes they are the same age, height, and build. The maid warns Letty not to do anything inappropriate, to which Letty responds with silence, changing her clothes without saying a word. The maid becomes suspicious and tries to leave, but Letty chases after her, saying, "It would be easier for you to give up." The maid screams and Clarke enters the room. The maid informs him that Letty is trying to take her clothes and escape. Clarke asks Letty if they can talk as friends, but Letty refuses and insists on escaping. Later, we see Letty lying on her bed, sad and lost in thought. Suddenly, Clarke appears and admires her delicate beauty, calling her the perfect princess for him. Letty looks away, and the maid enters, commenting, "It seems you're very happy now." Letty quickly corrects her, saying, "Clarke brought me back here, locked me up, and wants to force me to marry him. He told me about his feelings, but it's wrong for him to imprison me without considering how I feel about him." The maid responds, "Clarke has tried many ways to reach you," before excusing herself and leaving the room. Later that night, Letty gazes out of the window and smiles when she sees the full moon. Realizing it's her chance to escape, she executes her plan and sneaks into the forest. However, just as she thinks she's free, Clarke grabs her hand, stopping her in her tracks. He asks, "Would you prefer a diamond necklace or pearls to match your wedding gown?" Letty glares at him, replying, "I don't think this is the right time for that." And so, today's episode of this anime ends. Stay tuned for the next episodes, and don't forget to subscribe and activate the notification bell to keep up with all the latest updates. After Leticia's failed attempt to escape the palace by climbing out her window, Clarke had her placed in a more secure room. Maria explained the room's purpose of calm detachment, noting that it was often used to discipline nobles who defy palace rules. She reassured Leticia that, while it was confining, no noble had ever lost their life within its walls. Brian is also present, happily eating the snacks placed on the table as she chats with Leticia. She informs her newfound friend that she has been hired to act as her conversation partner, a role meant to keep Leticia occupied from planning further escapes. Leticia feels a deep sense of betrayal, knowing Brian is participating in keeping her confined. Brianna, however, was unapologetic, casually explaining that money was the most important thing in the world. Brian also reveals another reason for her visit. She proudly holds up a recently released romance novel. The book quickly became a bestseller across the kingdom. Leticia's disbelief grew as Brian began summarizing its plot. The novel, as it turns out, was a fictionalized and highly romanticized retelling of Leticia's life. The story painted Leticia as a brave and resilient heroine who endured rigorous princess lessons to be with her one true love, Prince Clarke. When Leticia questioned how such a story could exist, Brown admitted her involvement. She explains that to sway public opinion, she had shared stories of Leticia's struggles with people. The result was a kingdom enamored with the idea of their future queen, a young woman who had supposedly faced immense adversity. To be with her prince, public enthusiasm for the royal wedding was at an all-time high, and Leticia's personal desires had been drowned out by the collective joy of the people. Brian, proud of her efforts, celebrated with more biscuits cheerfully, noting that everyone in the kingdom was rooting for Leticia and Clarke's marriage. Leticia, however, trembled with frustration, muttering that all she wanted was her freedom. Ryan, though sympathetic, pointed out the futility of resistance. She states that Clarke will never give up on her, no matter how many times she will try to escape. She also questioned Leticia's aversion to the marriage, emphasizing that Clarke was a good man who could provide her with a life free of hardship. As Brianna sipped her tea, she winced, having burned her tongue. She apologized briefly and glanced at Leticia, who sat gracefully, effortlessly sipping her tea with perfect poise. Brian couldn't help but admire her composure. Leticia, however, stared lifelessly at her tea, reflecting on the years of princess training that had instilled such habits in her. Brian admits that princess lessons are brutally difficult, recalling how she couldn't endure them herself. Where she briefly tried during Leticia's absence, even Catherine and Isabella, who grew up in the palace nursery from their toddler years, constantly complain about the grueling nature of the training. Suddenly, Leticia rises from her seat and moves toward the window. Brianna tenses, convinced her friend is planning yet another escape. Instead, Leticia stops at the window and stares longingly at the world outside. She repeats that she wants her freedom and her choices. She lamented how even the most basic decision, like choosing her husband, was taken from her. She confesses that she doesn't understand why becoming Prince Clarke's fiancé was so important in the first place. Above all, she wishes she had the freedom to love someone of her own choosing. Brianna, slightly exasperated, breaks the silence, questioning Leticia if she even knows what it means to be in love. She reminds Leticia that choosing love and living on one's own terms is a luxury if few can afford. The unexpected coldness of Brian's response stuns Leticia as she turns away from the window and returns to her seat. Silent but clearly unsettled by the remark, one day, Leticia lounged on her sofa, bored and frustrated with her confinement. Suddenly, her older brother Nader appears in front of her, lightly scolding her for being so unlike in her posture. He presses a letter onto her face, breaking her reverie. Leticia's mood shifts immediately when she realizes it's from their mother. Nader then places a small green gift box on the table. Their mother, he explains, has been expressing her excitement about the day Leticia will become a proper queen. Leticia ignores the comment and bombards Nader with questions about their village, eager for news of Lily and the others. Nader reassures her that everyone is well, the village remains peaceful, and their father has even been considering adding another horse to the family stables. Leticia sigh, wistfully voicing her longing to return to the villa. Nader quickly shuts her down, insisting it's impossible for her to leave the castle. She tries to bargain, asking at least to be moved back to her previous room with its spacious interior and large windows. Once again, Nat refuses. Defeated, Leticia shifts her attention. Finally noticing the green box on the table, she asks what might be inside and major gestures for her to guess. She inspects it carefully and even sniffs it. She breaks into a wide grin, realizing It's filled with her mother's special muffins. Her excitement is palpable as she prepares to take a bite at home, but Nader interrupts her, admitting mischievously that he helped make one of the muffins, meaning one of them will taste absolutely dreadful. The siblings then agree to play a game in which they death muffin roulette. The rules are simple. They play rock, paper, scissors to decide who picks a muffin first, and whoever eats the bad one loses. Leticia wins the first round confidently, sniffing the muffins to avoid the disastrous one made her laughs at Leticia's exaggerated expressions as she sniffs the muffins, clearly amused by how unlike she appears. Leticia finally selects a muffin and steps aside, allowing her brother to approach the box. Confidently, Nader claims he knows exactly which one their mother made and picks what he believes to be a perfect muffin. Standing face to face, they each take a bite of their chosen muffins to test their luck. Leticia grins as the familiar sweet and fluffy flavor melts in her mouth. Nader also nods in approval, declaring his muffin to be equally delicious. Realizing neither of them picked the death muffin, they decide to up the stakes, abandoning the orderly game of rock, paper, scissors and squatting on each other's hands to snatch the next muffin from the box. Their competitive antics escalate. But once again, they both end up with good muffins, with only 2 muffins remaining in the box. Leticia hesitates. She stares at the final options, trying to determine which one might be safe, but neither looks or smells any different, growing impatient with her indecisiveness. Nader rolls his eyes and lectures her about how her inability to make quick decisions often leads to trouble. Leticia pointedly ignores his critique, still fixated on the muffin, sighing in exasperation. Nader reaches over her and picks one of the muffins himself. He remarks that nothing will happen if Leticia doesn't act, leaving Leticia with no choice but to take the remaining muffin. They both bite into their muffins at the same time, only to be assaulted by an overwhelming wave of spiciness, gasping and fanning their mouths. They realize their mother had tricked them. Both muffins were spiked with a fiery surprise. Nader chuckles, declaring her mother the true winner of the game. Despite the lingering heat in her mouth, Leticia manages to laugh, and Nader observes that she seems more like her usual self. He points this out with a smile, relieved to see her in better spirits. Leticia calls out to Maria, asking for refreshments to help them recover from the spice. Later that lean, Maria bids Leticia goodnight, leaving her alone in her room. Leticia feels a wave of relief. Finally, she has some peace to focus on her next escape plan. She begins inspecting her small room for a possible way out other than the heavily guarded door. As she moves around, her foot presses down a creaky forbo. Curious, she kneels down and discovers what appears to be a hidden compartment. Excitement bubbles in her chest as she lifts the cover, only to find that it's a shallow storage space, far too small to serve as an escape. Leticia moves to the ornate bookshelf in her small room, her eyes scanning for any signs of a hidden door as she inspects the shelves. She notices that most of the books are historical texts, but one stands out, Prince Clarke's diary. Hesitation grips her reading. It could get her in trouble. Yet her curiosity overrides her caution, and she reaches for it as soon as she pulls the diary from the shelf. A strange mechanism whirs to life. The bookshelf slides to the side, revealing a secret passage. Leticia's heart races at the prospect of freedom. To be safe, she throws the diary into the passage to test for traps. When nothing happens, she steps in, hoping the passage leads outside before she can take another step. The familiar voice greets her with a "Good evening," light floods the passage, and Clarke sits casually in a chair, smiling. He comments on her disregard for his diary, amused by how she threw it without care. Clarke explains that he had expected her discovered the secret room during one of her escape attempts. He moved his quarters there temporarily to wait for her. Despite her unceremonious treatment of his diary, he admits he's pleased. She was curious enough to try to read it, since the diary is the key to opening the hidden room. Leticia stiffens, nervous about being caught. She tries to retreat to her room, but Clarke pulls a curtain, activating the mechanism to close the bookshelf. The passage seals, trapping her inside with him. As she attempts to flee, Clarke catches her hand and pulls her close, cradling her in his arms. When she meets his gaze, he calls her cute, and her cheeks flush red as she realizes the intimate position they're in. Her eyes dart to the nearby bed, and she thrashes in his arms, demanding to be let go. Clarke releases her, and she seizes the moment to shove him away, and he stumbles back, landing on the bed. Realizing why Leticia became so agitated, Clarke reassures her that he has no intention of touching her inappropriately before their wedding. However, he approaches her again, lying and close. Leticia braces for a kiss, only for Clarke to hug her. Instead, he tells her that physical affection is important in building a strong relationship. The next morning, determined to avoid a repeat of the previous night, Leticia enlists Maria to help move a heavy piece of furniture at the side of the bookshelf. Maria, curious, asks why they're moving it. Leticia explains what happened and declares she wants to keep Clarke out of her room. Maria gushes over how romantic the secret room sounds, but Leticia remains unimpressed. Their conversation is interrupted by the sound of the bookshelf mechanism struggling to move. The furniture blocks the passage from opening fully. Leticia laughs, imagining Clarke's frustration, only for him to enter her room through the main door. He notices the furniture and orders Maria to put it back before leaving. He promises Leticia he'll see her that evening. Frustrated, Leticia vents to Nader, who dismisses her complaints, reminding her that Clarke is her fiancé. Leticia insists she's uncomfortable with physical affection and inexperience in such matters. Nader advises her to be honest with Clarke, but to explain herself clearly so he understands her perspective. That evening, when Clarke moves to embrace her, Leticia firmly tells him not to touch her immoderately. She adds a penalty that if he oversteps his bounds, she'll stop calling him by his name. The thought of never hearing her say his name sifts the visibly distresses Clarke, and he reluctantly agrees her terms. Retreating for the night. The next morning, Leticia recounts the encounter to Brianna, who feels sorry for the prince. Brian points out that Clarke's affection shows he genuinely cares for Leticia and tries to win her attention. Their discussion is interrupted by Maria, who brings Clarke's visitation schedule. Leticia realizes to her horror that Clarke plans to visit her daily. She sighs, realizing she forgot to set limits on his visits. And with that, our episode comes to an end. Stay tuned for the next one, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for all our latest updates.